Hello, everybody. Pleasure to have everybody here. This is a slightly different hangout than we usually do. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome, not to welcome, but to co-host this with Zara Altair. Hello, Zara.
Hi, this is so much fun. This is everyone who's here. This hangout developed out of a conversation we were having, and Oleg said, "Why don't we do a hangout about that?" And I'm like, "Okay, yes," because we both had similar thoughts.
Exactly. And so,
And what I love is,
when we started, it's already fun, right? So, anyway, I guess, do you want to go first, Zara? Or do you want me to go first? I'm totally open either way.
oh, I wanted to share with everyone that originally Oleg had thought of having 38.35 tips for you and instead of 12 and a half. And it's one of the things that really irritates both of us because it's it's a total example of information overload. Nobody remembers 12, much less 42 ways to, boost your Facebook post or whatever it is. Um, and so I think part of the thing about attitude is really communicating with the people you want to reach, whether it's your customers, your current customers, or people that you want to have know more about you and your business. Approach them as a human being. To me, 42 tips on whatever it is just trying to show the world how smart you are. And that is completely different than helping someone solve a problem. Okay, that was my first little glunk. So, Oleg, you go.
Sounds good. Well, since I was going to have the 38 points, I'll go through them one by one, one at a time. No, the whole concept of this thing, and I know a lot of people do it, and of course, it's one of these things that people do it for a reason. There's a reason where you see a post that says 7 best ways to optimize your Pinterest post or whatever it might be. The reason is because psychologically speaking, people have been trained that, well, if I can just get these, at least that's the subconscious thinking, if I can just get these 7 points down and follow them, then I'll be fine. Then I'll be able to do my, Pinterest post the way it should be done. The whole concept of the way it should be done is a theoretical concept anyway, because people are different, people like different things, people prefer different things. And so, with that being the case, there is no such thing as specific science to it, because if there was, there would be only one of these posts and nobody else would post anything else, because this is the way you should be doing it. This is the right way to do it. There is no other way to do it. But yet, we see a barrage of all these different posts constantly with all these different numbers. And so, it winds up being a situation where you have major information overload when it comes to most people, especially in business, because they just, there's only so many of these posts you can consume. So you follow this guy, you follow that woman, you follow this company. And then in the end, you end up with this huge stream of all kinds of things that are helpful and useful, but at the same time, there's only so much you can consume. And I think the problem that I have with this, similar to what Zara, also I think she looks at it in a similar way, I should say, is that we can understand psychologically how people do it because it has certain amount of following, but at the same time, the quantity of it winds up killing the concept in the first place, because there are only so many hours in a day and so much people can consume. And so if you look at it from a standpoint, okay, so you're saying people like this, to some degree they do. In other words, being able to have specific instructions. At the same time, people hate it because there's too much. What's the answer? And the answer, of course, is different for different people. And of course, you can use the same excuse for anything, saying because there's so much of this or so little of that, that there's really no good answer. So, I mean, it's just nothing but philosophy. And to some degree, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I'm not going to say that I know better than somebody else or somebody knows better than me. But at the same time, I think the solution is that if you look and wind up hiring somebody, because we're talking about consultancy, people who are knowledgeable and people who um, are on the ball, is the easiest way of describing it, then you can work with these people. That does not mean that they know everything and nobody else knows anything. It's not like that at all. There's tons of people that know a lot of stuff. There are no people who know everything. So if you're talking to a consultant and they tell you that they're, top of the crop of the cream, if you will, or cream of the crop, whatever the statement is, and they know everything, they're lying through their teeth. There is no such person on this planet that knows everything. So you want to get people who are knowledgeable and at the same time who can solve, as Zara pointed out, your problems. And that's where it comes into the whole thing with attitude. We'll go into it more. Zara, I'll let you
Yeah,
make some.
well, I just give an example from this morning. I had a quick Skype call with someone, and it was really our first real conversation. And he said, I really don't know anything about content marketing or blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's fine. That's my role. What I want you to do is to treat me as though I were a prospective customer and tell me about your business, because I needed more substance about their business, and what they consider the main points, um, and the main benefits of their business, because I'm going to be writing about them. I'm going to be writing informational posts, but I'm going to be tying it into the service that they offer. So, it's not that salesperson's job to know about content. It's it's my job as a writer to help them understand why we're developing a strategy instead of, just throwing out blog posts um, because that's the other thing is like content to create content really doesn't do much except fill up space. And I know that Randy Milanovich has talked about this a lot. If you're not following him on Google Plus, he's a great person to follow for this kind of philosophy about approaching your business and approaching your customers. So, what else did I want to say here? I think that in line with what Oleg was saying about knowing everything, is there's a really fine line about demonstrating your expertise and what I call showing how smart you are. And from a writer's perspective, because that's what I do, you really focus on one topic and help people understand, because I write for other people and I'm helping prospective customers understand their business. So I'm not throwing out a whole bunch of we do this and we do that. It's like I take one thing and we focus on that. And then, in a while we may do another post or article on a different aspect of that business's service. And I think it really benefits people, say here on Google Plus, when you are creating a post about yourself or your business, that you do stay focused, and that the 42 topics or the 38.35 topics or even the 15 is really an information overload. What happens with people is, instead of remembering all those 15 things, they probably won't remember any of them. But if you bring it down to 1 to 5, there's a much better chance that, one, the people will be actually engaged in what you have to say. They will remember the information that you give them, and they will also remember you with gratitude for having a topic, speaking about it, and letting it go rather than trying to cram in a whole bunch of information. It really makes a difference in engagement. You know, if you want people to engage, which is how you show them who you are and how you demonstrate your expertise, that's one of the best ways to do it. One topic covered well, or at least with your opinion, whether it's a negative opinion or a positive opinion.
Yeah, this is the whole concept of attitude.
Yeah.
And that is that it's not so much the steps. It doesn't matter if it's 5 steps or 20 steps, you know, whatever it might be. The important thing is that people get to know you. Obviously, you need to know what you're talking about. So no question, you need to show some savvy in terms of what it is that you do and you know what you can offer to them, things like that. But I think the attitude part is extremely important because there's many people that could be hired. I mean, there's many consultants out there, and like I said, everybody has their own approach. You know, there's a famous joke that you take 10 programmers, put them on the street, ask them, give them a problem, they'll give you 10 different answers. That doesn't mean that any of those answers is wrong. All of them accomplish the same thing, but they're different. The people approach these differently. And I think what the situation here is, at least what I'm trying, the point I'm trying to drive is, if you look at, I came up with a little formula yesterday, just as a, also trying to be a little funny, but
Great. Okay.
if you take confidence and then you add to it bad attitude, you wind up with arrogance, is what it is. So confidence plus lousy attitude equals to arrogance. And there is a very fine line between the confidence and between arrogance. And I've seen it many, many times. I mean, a lot of people, you know, stray over the line one way or the other. And of course, it's also in the eye of the beholder, but it really is the case. It really is a difference between how you carry yourself, what kind of attitude you project. It makes a difference between people looking at you as somebody who is savvy and knowledgeable versus somebody who is arrogant. Maybe you have enough savvy in place to be arrogant, but most people don't like people who are arrogant. It's just the way it is. And some people, of course, come across looking like they're arrogant without trying to be arrogant. But the bottom line is, however people perceive you, that's how people perceive you. There's, you know, it is what it is basically what I'm trying to say. So in the case here, I think, you know, in going back to what Zara was saying, I think when you're doing consulting, it's important to convey who you are as a person and the kind of attitude you project versus just what it is that you're going to do for them. Because I think that will go a long way towards people feeling comfortable working with you. And the bottom line being, in terms of the information overload, is what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a person to hire you as a consultant, for example, but it needs to be a combination of both, you know what you're doing, and also they can work with you on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, whatever it might be. And that's where the attitude kicks in. Because no matter how much you know, if you're a total utter jerk, people won't be able to work with you. It's just the way it is. And I know when I hire somebody to work with, because you know I have certain knowledge in certain areas, but I certainly don't know everything even in my own areas. No question about that. But I know more than certain people do. Let's put it this way. And you know, a good example with people. I mean, one of the examples, I have my drumsticks here. I would show you an example. I can show you a small little thing I can do with my drumsticks that most likely a lot of people in this audience will not be able to do. And that's not the reason that I'm any better or anything on the personal level, but I'm certainly better on the drums level because I took lessons for a number of years and practiced this, and now I can do it. But the bottom line is when I show it to people who don't play drums, as an example, then everybody's in kind of, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. You can play drums so well. Well, compared to them, I play drums well. Compared to some people like Dave Weckl, I shouldn't even be holding sticks. So it just depends. There's a level of competency that is different, and people's perceptions are different depending on what it is. And the bottom line being that if you're going to be working with somebody and you're competent enough to do the job, there's plenty of other people who are competent enough to do the job as well. So I think what happens at that point is the attitude of how you conduct yourself, how you deal with these people makes a huge difference whether somebody is going to both trust you, because they're not going to do anything with you without trust. And trust has nothing to do with savvy. It has everything to do with attitude, in my view. What I call attitude is the way you are and the way you project yourself and the way you talk to people. That's what's going to determine whether they're going to trust you or not. Yes, part of it is your knowledge, but at the same time, a huge part of it is the attitude. Zara, any comments there?
Yeah, I think it's the attitude is, you know, if someone is out shopping, as it were, and they have three candidates that they're considering to do a particular job for them or to buy from or to whatever it is that in your consulting, and you have the attitude, the personality, the patience to listen to their questions, that is what will click over the sale and make someone your customer. And if you keep and sustain that attitude while you're working with them, that is part of retaining that customer. You know, because a one-time project for a consultant is cool. You know, it's nice, brings in some money, but an ongoing relationship means that you really work well together. And that's going to be different for different people. And it's back to the old, you know, attraction marketing stuff, you know. Not everyone is going to like you, and you just have to get real with that. You really do. And, you know, if someone doesn't like your style or your particular attitude, that's cool, because somebody else will. And I know this is really basic stuff, but I always like to say it because it's really true that you want, and especially in a consulting business, you want people that really resonate with you, your style, because whatever it is that you're doing is your expertise. But to create that ongoing, sustained relationship takes the attitude. And whatever your attitude, whoever you are, that's who you need to show to your clients. And that's who you need to show to your potential clients, as far as I'm concerned. Show who you are, because the people who show up are the ones who are going to like that you. That's all about what Oleg said a minute ago about trust. You know, they're trusting you because they not only like what you have to say, but they like the way you say it, which is your online attitude.
Well, it's not just that. It's like David Emerald says, you know, you have to be yourself because everybody else is taken. So you basically, you know, should not be playing a game where you're trying to show. That's one of the things people do, I think, online in social media, is they try to project their savviness by basically stepping over who they really are in some ways to try to push the point about them being whatever they're trying to project. And I think this is where the problem is, that it's not really them. They're trying to project themselves as somebody else. And this is where, you know, I had a conversation one time which went really, really bad. I mean, this is probably the worst conversation I've ever had with somebody online. And that's partially because, you know, text is not exactly the same as non-text communication. People don't know you. People make assumptions. You may not be saying the right things. And so it's not, I don't for a second want to say that this is going to be somebody else's fault. I did nothing wrong. I said some things that in retrospect I shouldn't have said. I did apologize for them, but I still said them. And so it was one of these deals that kind of went out of control. But the bottom line, that what happened there, which I totally disagreed with, is the gentleman, which, you know, I won't name any names here, but the gentleman was basically having the argument with me. And then by the time the argument kind of escalated, which actual argument came out of almost nothing in terms of the point that was made. And then, I wound up finally backing down, saying, we'll just have to agree to disagree. And the gentleman wrote back saying that, no, I'm not going to agree to disagree. You're wrong. And this is, of course, when you get into that kind of level of conversation, then all kinds of, red flags go up in most people's heads. Because, I knew that I was definitely not wrong. I may have a different opinion than this guy, but in terms of telling me that I'm wrong, according to him, I might be wrong, not according to me. And so then, of course, it winds up getting into the area where the whole post wound up being deleted, people stop talking to each other, that kind of deal. And I hate those kind of environments anyway. I don't want to deal with people on that kind of level. But at the same time, it's an example where the attitude part can play, can be both positive and negative. And of course, everybody has their own opinion, their own ways, and things can and sometimes go out of control. And this is where I think people who are consultants, including myself, need to step back a little bit when they get into these kind of conversations. And the situation with apologies obviously needs to take place, and it did. But at the same time, this other deal where somebody refuses to just say, "Look, we disagree. Let's leave it at that." It's not a good approach. I mean, this is to me where the bad attitude is right there. Another example was another gentleman who I actually respected a lot. He's pretty savvy when it comes to his expertise, but again, his attitude is completely lousy in my view. And that is, I didn't hire him. It was just a conversation in the post. But the situation was, it was a different person. And I'll give you the example specifically so you can see what I'm talking about. He basically wrote a little line saying that it didn't work doesn't mean that you failed just because it didn't work. And my looking at it from my programmer's logical standpoint, that didn't make any sense to me, because if something didn't work, that means you failed. That doesn't mean you failed in life. Doesn't mean you failed in your marriage or anything else. It just, if something specific did not work, the fact that it didn't work means that that particular thing failed. That doesn't mean it's permanent, doesn't mean it cannot be fixed, but it did fail. And so the idea of saying that if it didn't work, to say that that doesn't mean it's a failure for that particular specific thing, to me, it doesn't compute. And so the guy jumped all over me when I said that I disagree with the sentiment, and say that if it failed, that means, if it didn't work, it means it did fail. And we went kind of back and forth with semantics, everything else. And in the end, the guy comes back and says, "You're wrong." And again, it's the same kind of situation whereby, I'm not wrong. I'm wrong according to him. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong. And so, you get into the whole mutual. So the attitude, what I'm trying to drive at is not specific examples, but the way you conduct yourself. And I'm realizing I'm putting myself here on the table here with a couple of examples of me doing the wrong thing, which some people, or all people, I guess, do at some points. But I think it's important to understand, going back to what Zara was saying about the point that if people don't like you, quote unquote, then it's okay because somebody else will. And I think everybody needs to step back a little bit from that and look at it in a more depth, because somebody may not like you just because of the way they are, but also they may not like you because you're doing something wrong. And so you need to be, I think, conscious enough and astute enough to realize that and look at these examples. Gina Fidel, who is still in the audience, hopefully, she's a perfect example of I'll put her on the pedestal, let's put it this way, in this particular case. Going back to example with her, when I got to know her on a personal level, okay, I have no idea, and this is before I even saw that she's got this unbelievable talent in art and painting. And so, I knew that her company did websites, like many other companies do. I haven't seen any of her websites. And just by talking to her a little bit and finding out the kind of person she is in terms of the attitude, I would be totally fine with actually hiring her to do some business with her. And by the way, same thing with Zara. It's the attitude and personal relationship, not even knowing how savvy they both are, not even looking, this is before I read Zara's, one of her little novels, and before reading some of the other stuff that she's done. The attitude that they project, both of these women, is enough there for me to hire them to be consulting for me, just with the attitude alone. So I think the savvy part of people, whatever it is you do, in my case it's IT consulting, in their case it's writing and websites, I would almost say that that's less important, in overall things, than the attitude that gets projected in the relationship that's being built and being formed. Zara, I'll let you take over at this point.
Well, I'll just second all of that, and I want to talk about ways to, when you feel that, to deal with potential customers that really aren't understanding you yet. But first, speaking of Gina, I'm sorry, folks, we don't have comment tracker today, so I can't bring anything up. She says, as consultants and companies providing services that have a lot of mystery for an average client customer are fulfilling the role of educator to a point as well. And that educating attitude helps build in patience and humility. And that is just such a fabulous point, Gina. I know you had to go. I don't know if you're still here, but yes, thank you for saying that. Which leads me to a couple of points, and I have found these lifesavers in certain situations, because sometimes as a consultant, you can think that that person knows about your business. And here's going back to Gina's statement about having a lot of mystery for someone who doesn't know what you do. So sometimes, and I can be very prickly, I have to admit, and and so sometimes people will ask me a question, and my first response will be, inside will be, what a doomkoff, and then I realize, no, 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 and so what comes out of my mouth is, that's a great question. And it's a great question for me because it's brought to mind what that person doesn't know about my skills or about what I do, so that I can outline for them what it is that I do and how it is, in their particular case, that I will be pinpointing their needs. So I wanted to share that. And then sometimes clients say things that are just totally off the mark. It happens to me. I don't know about you, Oleg, but it happens to me where they say something and you're like, man, I've been dealing with this person for 4 months and they still don't get it. It's totally off the mark. I'm batting my head against the wall. But then I learned this phrase from a friend of mine who was a physicist and mechanical engineer, and he built one-off measurement machines for hospitals and the like. Hey, we want it, 20 millimeters. We wanted to measure 20 millimeters deeper or whatever it was, and he'd make one for them, Anyway, so he found himself in these situations from time to time, and he taught me this phrase: you have to do this part. You have to tilt your head, and then you go, wow, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that. Which,
Yeah, but I don't know if I would totally agree with that, Zara, because if you do that kind of stuff, it's almost like you're trying to mock somebody because you really don't think that this is an interesting question or this is a useful question.
no, I mean, I was playing it, but it does two things, because I've now used that instead of getting totally angry right at the moment. Okay, keeps me from being angry, and two, it pulls me back enough to actually think about what it is they just said, and to come up with a reasonable answer instead of just being angry.
Yeah, but it's a tight rope basically, because I can understand what you're saying, but at the same time, like I said, you're really, when you do that kind of stuff, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I mean, a lot of people do that. You're basically trying to appeal to their self of their own ego, and a lot of people who hire somebody do have ego problems, and so you wind up trying to do that to score some points to obviously save the deal, because in the end, we're doing whatever we're doing, no matter what approach we're using, we're trying to sell. I mean, as much as people say, I hate salespeople, used car sales, blah, 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 the reality is you're always selling something. If you're not selling anything, you're on the street dying of starvation. It's just the way it works.
Right. So
So
selling involves, you know, countering objections. And because people always have objections when you're in that sales position. And so the skill as a salesperson, which is especially if you're a one person consultancy, the skill as a salesperson is to do just that. You know, if you've been around and talked to a lot of people, you know right off the bat people who just won't work for whatever reason. But on the other hand, there are people who will work. You just have to do more what Gina calls education. So if they ask a question or say something that seems like they don't know anything, it's just a way, it's a trigger for me to pull back and be in that sales position and just be countering an objection instead of getting into a fight, as it were, an argument about what it is that person just said. So
right, because it doesn't accomplish anything. If you get into a fight, the
yeah,
person
it's
with
all
the
gone
second
anyway.
point,
Yeah,
they're just not going to be your client. You're not, even if you make your point and you feel better that you made the point and you know that you're right in your heart, you still didn't accomplish the sale.
yeah. Then it's just an ego thing for you.
So I think ideal thing to do is to obviously find clients that are in tune with you on a personal level. They understand, and you can bring enough information for them to trust you, and they bring enough information for you to trust them, because it needs to be a mutually trustworthy experience. And then when you have that situation, then you can allow yourself to be yourself, and that way, whatever you are, they take what they have, and if they decide to hire you based on what they see and based on the way you project yourself, and that's the way you actually are, I think that's the ideal situation. Then there's no pretense. You're not trying to be something you're not, and you're doing obviously the best job you can. And a lot of times, I think one of the problems I've had personally in my consulting is that I try to always treat people that hire me, their companies, as my own. I think that's, for me, it's the best way to provide the best and the most value, is to actually treat another company as if it was my own, because my results are usually much better because of the situation. And I think, I don't know if everybody can actually do that. And in some cases, I wound up being beat over the head with the CEO saying, "What the hell are you doing, demanding X amount of performance from some of the people below me?" Because they think you're overbearing and overwhelming and some other choice words. And so I actually, so I look back, step back and thinking, okay, I'm trying to do something for your company here, something that I would do for my own company, and at the same time you're going to be getting on my case for this. Then obviously the pushback is, okay, if that's the case, let them go to heck, do whatever they want, screw things up any way they want. Why should I care? So this particular approach has negatives as well, but I still think it's a better approach, because then you really wind up getting people who definitely trust you even more, seeing how dedicated you are to their cause. What do you think, Zara?
I really agree, and I that is a very important point for any consultant, is to make that company yours, to make that business yours. And because that allows you to start making we statements with them. We're doing this, we're doing that. I want to bring up two things that Gina, who's still here, said. First, she said, this mystery about what we do is a really interesting thing. With each and every single client, we need to learn how they hear and what their knowledge level is. Yes. And she makes a really great point. If we create too much of a rehearsed speech or canned promotion, we'll miss the mark with most people we work with. That's so true. I don't even have a canned speech. I don't do canned very well. It doesn't work with me. And then also on the points of Gee, that's interesting. She says, no need to be cynical, and I agree. You don't need to be cynical about it. You just need to, you know, step back mentally. So Gina says, no need to be cynical. That, gee, that's interesting. I need to think about that. Can work really well. Or that's a great question. It's not just scoring points, it's a deflector that can give you time to absorb and recalibrate your reactive response. And I think that's really too. That was such a polite way of saying what I was struggling with, Gina. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's it's all, again, different folk strokes for different folks, and I always say that people are people, which in my case means that they're just different people. They have different desires, different wants, different needs, and therefore it's absolutely impossible to come up with something that would be on the level of science, which says that that's it. I mean, this is how we do it. It's going to work for everybody the same way, and you're going to be successful. It's just not reality. It's just not. It doesn't work like that. And so, if you do make some statements that are basically salesy, or you're trying to be salesy, because again, we're all trying to sell some stuff, then it winds up being, in some people's the way some people receive it, it would be considered not genuine. And if people see that, then obviously there goes your trustworthiness out the door. With some people, again, some, I mean, you can certainly pull wool over people's eyes. People have done it since the beginning of time, and they continue to do it. I mean, we see it all over the place and stuff. As much as we say we hate it, it still happens all the time because it's easier. I mean, people lie and cheat and everything else because it's easier. It's easy for them to do. Being a black and white person that has certain that has full integrity and has certain um, uh, it has certain
Standards. Let's just say standards.
standards that they stick to, no matter how much it hurts them as part of this process, no matter how many sales they lose because of it. It's something that's rare, and something that's, at least for myself, is extremely appealing and admirable for people like that. Unfortunately, because it is much harder to be like this, most people, unfortunately, don't stick to that. So they do whatever they need to do, you live one life, get the most of
Right.
it.
I
And
think it's a very different position when when you think about sales as being a salesperson in a large organization and your major focus is sales. But for consultants, it's a different situation. It's all part of this continuous spectrum of bringing people on board. I don't think of it so much as sales, which is, do you want the pink one or the blue one, as bringing people on board with what value you can offer with your service to their business. That's why I think Gina's point earlier, about taking that business on as your own, is so important. Is that the more information you as a consultant can get about their business, the more you know, and the better able you are to address their particular concerns with your service. Phone call I had this morning that I was mentioning earlier, um, this person had been sort of called in as someone that maybe I should talk to, and we had quite a time coordinating, even a time to talk. And then, he said, I'm just really busy. I'm going to be traveling for the next, 4 weeks and da da da. I don't know anything about this anyway. And I said, what if we talk now for 15 minutes? And I said, because you can tell me about your business better than anyone else there. And so we had a conversation. It was wonderful. It was a great conversation. But still, I had to sell, if you want to use that word, I had to sell this sell this idea of actually having a 15-minute conversation with this person. So, you know, part of sales is persistent, and as a consultant, you do need to be persistent, and not just take the first reason that somebody gives you why they can't talk to you. I mean, this is all basic sales stuff, so I'm not going to stay with that very much. But it makes a difference in, one, how you learn more about their business, and two, how they perceive you as a professional. Because when they share information about their business, that means that you can write back at them, show you how whatever it is your service is, how it will enhance what they're already doing. It's just that simple. Oh, look, you're smiling like,
No,
oh, Sarah, she's full of bullshit.
no, no. I was going to say that no question that when you're dealing with somebody, I always whenever I deal with any new business, I always tell them that it needs to be a synergy thing. You cannot possibly come in to do any kind of consulting or anything you want to do. I don't care how much you know, how well you know. There's no way you can possibly know their business like they do. And so because they know their business best, and this would be true of any business, then you need to be able to synergize the two together, where you bring in your savvy and your capabilities and your knowledge and your experience combined with their knowledge of their business. That's when you can actually make some decent headway. Otherwise, it's impossible to do anything productive because you don't even know what their challenges are. And so, yeah, I can come in and I know a lot of stuff about technology and about the internet and the apps and everything else. That's all wonderful, but which apps should people be using? Well, it depends on what they need.
Yeah.
And what they need is something that I don't know, but they do. So it's absolutely, I totally agree with you, Zara. Totally imperative to make sure that you get in sync with them in terms of them participating in the process to a certain degree, at least to find out what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish, at least on that on minimal level. And you cannot do this without having the proper attitude. You just cannot, if you don't sync with these people in a positive manner and project a positive attitude towards them and they project towards you, it needs to be, again, a two-way street. You're not accomplishing anything. Nothing's going to get done. Nothing's going to, and of course, a lot of times people don't want to waste time. That's one of the examples I want to use is I was trying to buy some software for one of my clients, and I needed to go out there to other companies to ask them if they have any current solutions in terms of their software. It's very specific, very vertical market piece of software. And what we did was we basically sent out these RFPs, trying to have them specifically describe what it is that they have, compare it to what we currently run, and so we can see how it would match, how well it would match or not match. And so there was a situation where you're asking people to divulge some of their secrets, not secrets, but divulge what it is that they have to offer, which in some cases is secret in terms of details. But at the same time, you're not guaranteeing them you're going to be buying their product. So they have to kind of put their neck on the line a little bit to try to give you what you want, because without it, they have no chance of selling anything to me and my client. And of course, if they do put out some information, then they have to put some time and effort, which may result in them not getting a sale. And that's typical of a lot of businesses. I'm sure people come to use Zara too, asking specific things, and you can't really. I mean, they want to see examples of your writing. They want to see this. They, have you done same thing, similar things for other businesses like ours, and blah blah blah. And you go out of your way to try to present them with whatever you have and show them some examples, but there's no guarantee they're going to be hiring you anyway. And so you wind up taking time and effort.
That's right. And in my case, and I think in many consultants' cases, there's what I do is, first I want them to know that I can write in a variety of styles and manners of speech and whatever, to different target audiences. So I always have a link to this wide spectrum of stuff I've written, But then I always pick out one or maybe two specific things that I've written that are somehow addressing an issue that they have for their business. And I say, You can always go see my writing samples over here. But here's something I did for another whatever, that, decrease their bounce rate or whatever it is that happened that we're talking about. I want to bring up some things that Jason Darrell said. He's here. Hello, Jason. Thank you staying up and being with us. He has a number of things to say. He says the starting point of any sale is exhibiting confidence in the product you're pitching. Well, yeah. And if you can't do that, you'll never get the opportunity to build trust. And whoa, that is so true. That is so true. So there is an argument to pander to someone if you know that they're the gatekeeper and you have to schmooze with them when the goal is to get past them. That's a good point. We hadn't addressed that, Oleg. The experienced salesperson will pick up on the gatekeeper's vibe and spot tire kickers in an instant. You then have to make a judgment call. It's your time as well as the customer's. As the consultant, it's just as important for your customer to make the right impression on you as you them. I love that point. That's true. There's some people you're not going to work with.
No question there. Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes the situation, that's why it's much tougher for people who are just starting out, because number one, they don't have as much experience, and number two, they don't have the examples and the references they can use. And at the same time, they wind up trying to get the business from just about anybody because they need to eat. And so you wind up dealing with some people who are, obnoxious, to put it mildly, or that completely take advantage of the situation in terms of, underpaying, in terms of, all kinds of different things. I remember dealing way back with a customer, it was some kind of website I was working on for them. Because part of my IT consulting involves a lot of web stuff as well, and so sometimes I farm it to somebody else, sometimes I have to do it myself, just depending on the situation. And this particular customer was just constantly something they need to change, constantly, which is ridiculous in terms of the amount of changes they wanted to make. And the worst thing was, it was the wife of the guy. The guy who hired me was, it's his company, and all of a sudden in the middle of the project, his wife steps in. All of a sudden now she's A, expert on the web stuff, and B, she's the one who runs the show. And I'm like, that's not how we initially structured it, but obviously you can't say that to the guy. Eventually I did, because I didn't have any choice. But she would say, can we make this, this line here be maybe like a couple of pixels higher? And then this blue, is there any way to make this blue bluer? And I'm like, are you serious here? I mean, are we actually talking about color blue being bluer than
you know what I do in those cases? Because people do either forget what they originally said, or somebody else comes in and wants to make sure that there are puppy pictures on every page, or whatever it is with web design. It can get really crazy. But what I do is I look at our original, agreement or whatever it was, and I say, back in February, what you wanted was blah, 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 and we agreed that, the line was going to be yellow, and it would be, pretty thin, and, any other decisions that you had made together jointly. And then I say, have you changed your mind? Because it turns it back on them, instead of giving you a demand and then another demand and then 2 days later another demand. Is I take them back to the original agreement and say, have you changed your mind? Then we need to restructure our agreement. This is going to cost them money. Then we need to restructure our agreement, because obviously things have changed. And that gives them pause to consider, is it really that important that the blue line be 3 pixels?
Well, especially considering the fact that, clearly people don't understand. I mean, this particular person doesn't understand that there is no such thing as blue or blue, because, each monitor would show blue differently. It's
Yes,
just
that's very true.
work. It would look one way on one screen, it would look differently on different on the phone. It has to do with different display technologies, different, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that blue and the way it's being presented. And so to make that kind of statement simply shows that you have no clue what you're talking about in that particular area, nor the question becomes, okay, if I do move that line 2 pixels higher, do you honestly think you're going to make more sales in your business? And of course, the answer is, you could bet your house that it's not, because it has nothing to do with it. But at the same time, people kind of get into that level of micromanagement sometimes.
Yeah, they do get into micromanagement. What I don't know how you would do it in web design, but I know for me with writing, I tell people from the get-go, that I'm going to do this, 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 and this, or whatever it is. And I tell them that for every piece that I write, there are 2 revisions automatically, because you may want to change something, or yeah, I made something up for someone the other day because I didn't know they wanted an About Us page, and I had a lot of things about what they were doing with their service, but didn't know a lot about them. So I'm writing along, and I said, this wonderful business is located in the Ozark Mountains, blah, 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 blah. And, the change was, I'm not in the Ozark Mountains. I'm at Lake of the Ozarks. And so I was like, oh, okay, and I just went back and changed it. But, and then he said, but everything else I love. And so it's like, you have to have some leeway for making little changes, but put a limit on how many of those changes you're going to do. I mean, that was a tiny change. Sometimes the changes are bigger. They want you to take out a paragraph or add a paragraph. This is writing, or restructure one of the paragraphs or something like that. So, but you have to have in your head, an idea of where your limits are, of how much of this extra after I've done the work, how much is included in the total package that I'm offering. And then be clear with yourself and be clear with your client that that's the package they're getting. So if they want more, that's cool. And, we'll just tack on a little extra charge.
This is the minutia of dealing with this stuff. But the point is, like, one of the things that Gina wrote, it says, when it comes down to it, we're in the service industry, and, some of us are, some of us are not. I mean, some people sell products, like Jason Darrell pointed out about, being proud of the product. So the product, I mean, you can have a specific product which is different from service. But the bottom line, she says, it's service industry, it's not that prospective clients or customers are always right, but I do find it helpful to remember that I'm here to serve. And that's absolutely right. I mean, the absolute statement of client is always right is bogus in my view. I mean, that should never be the case, because you're really going to get hurt if that's the case. Many times you're going to get stepped over, you're going to get run over. It's just simply taking this as a Bible statement that customer is always right is well, to me, it's nonsense. It shouldn't be like that. But at the same time, you do need to remember that they are hiring you to do a job, and so they are the boss. So you need to have, I mean, there's chain of command. They're here, and you're here doing a job for them, not on a personal level, but on the job level. And so you always need to remember that as well.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's really important as consultants that we're clear from the get-go what we're the package, the service, whatever you want to call it, that we're offering, and what our service limitations are, so that when we come up against, more added this and more added that, and oh, by the way, could you just do the meta descriptions for these 25 pages? Whoops, that wasn't in our original agreement. So it takes some amount of clarity to delineate, both for yourself and for the client, what our agreement is. What's our agreement? Because it saves the trouble later on. If they know that, for me, if they know that this original article or blog post or web page or whatever it is, uh, 2 revisions are included, that means, yeah, they get to give me feedback and could you change this? And no, what I really want to stress is that. All those things, okay, I go back, I rewrite them. That's fine. But it keeps you from the blue line's going to be with me forever now, Oleg. This keeps you from the endless blue line suggestions,
Yeah.
because those are things that really, one, eat at a consultant's time, and two, they're demoralizing. If you could just add this, and if you could just add that, and if you could just add this, and all of a sudden you are back to what you were mentioning earlier, Oleg. You're back to not getting a fair price for your service. So it's about our attitude. So that's why I think, to preserve our attitude and to be happy and cheerful and, all that stuff that we want to be with our clients, and to serve them well with our skills, we really need that delineation at the beginning so that everything is clear. And then it doesn't get all muddied with blue line requests or whatever your service is, that if you could just tack this on, but one is okay, but 20 of them is not okay. It's really a hard thing, especially for people who are starting out. You learn through experience. Like, I don't know what else to say. It's that all of a sudden you find yourself with a client who's just, you've done 35 revisions for them.
Yeah, like I said, it's the minutia of the deal. But the key thing, I think, and it goes to with our main discussion today, is that you're trying to use the right attitude and hopefully have the right attitude to build relationship with the person. So if something does go off the rails, you have enough of a um, personal capital on a relationship level with them to just say, look, this, we need to make some changes here because we can't continue in this direction. And to the point where it's not going to kill the project. And at the same time, these people, it needs to be reciprocal, is what I'm trying to say, is that the relationship needs to have reciprocity, both in terms of you doing whatever you're doing for the client and the client being decent to you as well. And going back to Jason Darrell's statement about, kicking the tires or not, and schmoozing and stuff, it's one of these deals that it's a really fine line. And at the same time, each person has their own level of where that fine line actually crosses, where you cross that fine line. Because yesterday, me and my son were watching the show called American Genius on Netflix, and they were talking about Gates versus Jobs. And if you look at that, you look at somebody like Jobs, who is about as big a jerk as you can possibly have, and all the Apple people, eye sheep as they call them, are going to be throwing rocks at me right now. But the bottom line is the guy was a total jerk when it comes to personal relationships and stuff with a lot of people, not just few people, a lot of people. And if you don't believe me, read Walter Isaacson's book called Steve Jobs, and you can see it. No question that the guy was a very unique individual. He certainly had his pluses as well, but at the same time, he definitely was an ultimate jerk. Then you look at Bill Gates, who is a nice guy, who is a saint right now, considering how much money he gives out and everything else. But if you look back in the beginning, when he started his thing, what made Bill Gates was IBM. I mean, if you just get rid of all the minutiae and all the rhetoric, it's really IBM that made Bill Gates be as rich and as meaningful as he was. And actually, he had some accomplishments of his own in terms of actually creating something Jobs has never done. He always, piggybacked on somebody else's creations, but he didn't actually create anything on his own. But Gates certainly did. And you look at that, but at the same time, you look at Gates and you say, okay, look at that incredibly important moment in the whole history of computers and his life. And that was the meeting with IBM when they said that they needed an operating system. The guy lied through his teeth saying he had one. He didn't have one, but he said that he did. And so you look at that as an example, which turned the man into the richest man in the world, obviously extremely successful. And you think, well, maybe that's the approach to take then. I mean, if the guy lies through his teeth with his eyes wide open, looking straight at you, saying he has something and he doesn't, and he becomes so successful, maybe that's the approach to take to be able to get ahead. And this is where, for each person is their own take, I guess, on this, to say, do you want to lower yourself to this level and lie to people to be able to get ahead? And for some people it's yes, for some people it's no. But it just depends on your own preferences, I guess. But I think the attitude in consulting is a very important thing, mostly for building relationships that do, move into. I mean, I have one of my clients, the client I was telling you about, not the old Blue Lines client, but the client that I've been developed a system for them, and I've been supporting them for many years. I've known the CEO of that company for over 30 years now, and they've been my client for close to that same amount of time. So there is an example right there where you can actually have a very long-lasting relationships with your clients, and it's not just because of what I know, it's also because of the way our relationship is, meaning the attitude. So I'll finish with that and let Zara finish with her statements, and I think we pretty much
we're
discussed enough today on this topic.
yeah. I wanted to bring one more thing. Oh, look at Jason Darrell. It's a thin blue line, not a cop out. That's great, Jason. Thank you. Anyway, what I just wanted to end with a little story, and that is that I spent most of my adult life in somewhere in the San Francisco Bay Area, and a sense of humor is a prominent factor in the San Francisco Bay Area. And, the line, "There are no straight men in San Francisco," comes from vaudeville days when, if you tell a joke, someone else is going to come right back at you. They aren't just going to go, "What?" So, and then I moved to Southern California. Just, it was a family deal, and I had an estate to deal with, and it took 4.5 years to close the estate, and so I was there for a while, and I discovered that in that area, being a professional, in order to be perceived as a professional, people were serious. They never told jokes. They always just, with the facts. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake. And so I finally, with, a couple of my medical professionals, I said, listen, I'm from San Francisco, and, a sense of humor and professionalism are not mutually exclusive. And I said that to them, and everyone that I said that to, they completely changed. They started telling jokes. They were funny. They were, but it's like the sense of perception of what it is that they needed to be in order to be a professional, is right back to where we started at the beginning, is like who you are, what you present to the world, how you deal with your clients, and having a sense of yourself and your business and the services that you offer, so that you can play with your clients. I think it's a really important thing to do that. It's business, and you're going to get the business done, but I think you can help your clients along with a bit of a sense of humor. And boy, Jason is one of the people who has a fabulous sense of humor. Well, we lost you, Oleg.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here, and especially the folks who contributed to the conversation, because there's a lot to this, and there's some very subtle things in attitude and consultancy. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us today, and huge thanks to Zara for tolerating me today. And we'll try to do something different another time. For those that don't know, Zara Altair is a professional writer. And do you call yourself writer or copywriter? What do you call yourself, Zara?
I just call it writing because it's
Okay, she just writes on it.
copywriting to me is has a lot of hooks in it, and I don't particularly want to go there. I call it writing.
All right, we'll stick to that. I almost was afraid that I asked the wrong question there, but
No,
so she's writing, and so if you need anything, any kind of written word for your websites or for your blogs or for your marketing materials or anything else, you can certainly find her on Google Plus and a number of other social networks. I'm sure there is on LinkedIn and some
yeah,
other
I am, but I'm here all the time on Google Plus.
But she's mostly on Google Plus. So Google, if you're looking to where to send a check, it's to Zara Altair. And I do computer consulting, internet consulting, basically information technology. So my main emphasis is on helping small businesses most of the time to use technology to improve their businesses, something that many times they can't easily afford to actually have their own IT departments to do the same thing. I mean, most bigger companies have IT departments, so they handle their technology needs that way. But any business definitely needs technology, and I specialize in helping smaller businesses still be able to have that technological advantage that big businesses have by helping with picking the right tools, how to use them, including training, including support, development, kind of, that's what I do. So with that,
I want to add one more thing because you didn't say the words spec zone. So if you are a small business and you're looking for that kind of help with IT service, which is sort of a mutual interface, get in touch with Oleg to find out more about spec zone because it's a really affordable way to get IT into your business. Right.
thank you, Zara. Couldn't have said it better myself. See, that's why Zara knows how to use words. I just do it. All right, thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day, whatever you might be. And until next time, take care.
All right. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.